Hello and welcome to the SaaS Growth Podcast. This week we're here with James McKay, the founder and CEO of Ven, a RevOps studio based in Toronto. So how are you today, James?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm great. We're coming into autumn here now in Finland, and that's super fun at the moment.
Well, I'm in
Still
Canada,
warm.
so I feel
I
like
know,
we're
same
not
problems,
that
right?
different. Yeah.
Same problems. So give me a rundown of Ven and how you came to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd call us a boutique RevOps consulting agency, for lack of a better term. I think I'm going to hit some focus in the next a couple of years, but right now we're broadly helping Series A, B, C tech companies, B2B SaaS and fintech companies. I started about a year and a half ago, so we haven't been around too long. The decision making to start a RevOps agency, in which may go to answer a little bit about why the company brought in its mandate, is it was not exactly my intention to start this business. I'd come out of a long career in tech. I had spent about 15 years. The first half was in sales. To the point I started as basically an SDR through a director of sales, and then I made a mid-career pivot to follow the operational side, which I really enjoyed. And then after my last full-time role, I determined, like, hell or high water, I'm going to start a company. And I started toying with a tech concept. And it was like consumer app, travel. And I started developing it and then talking to people, like friends and families, like VCs, people like in the network, though. I hadn't gone out beyond the friends and family. And I kept getting the same response, which is, this might be a good idea, but do RevOps. Why don't you do RevOps? You're known for RevOps. So eventually a contract emerged, and I took it and tried it and liked it. And from there, I was like, okay, cool. I'll just start a company. And here we are a year and a half later, 20 plus customers, like logos under our belt across, I think, almost 40 contracts across those 20 customers now, and 5 full-time people. Got my architect, project manager, a roster of part-timers who come in and help on projects. So it's been great.
It sounds like you're really starting to grow and hit your stride. So for people who don't know, could you explain what RevOps is?
Yeah, it's the operational side of the customer-facing functions. I think that there's a little bit of dispute, I would say, on the definitions of where it begins and ends. To me, it starts at the very first customer-facing function, which is typically marketing, and ends through customer retention, which is usually your success support, whatever team it is, depending on how you're organized. And so all of the operational components of that. And so what's an operational component? It's, your actual workflows and how you do your job. It's the tooling and the tech stack. It should be, in my mind, numbers, data, information, reporting. And then this is disputed too, but in my mind, enablement. So making sure all of these systems, tools, processes, and things are taught and adopted by your users, which is effectively the frontline people on these teams.
Cool. And so where does RevOps fit into that? Because it's such a broad scope and such a wide area of responsibility. Where does RevOps sit in the sort of marketing, sales, retention sort of scope of things? And how do you get in there?
So within the scope, I'm not even sure if I know how to answer that.
I may have asked the
I
wrong
would
question.
say
What should I have asked?
In my mind, the RevOps org is intended to partner with the leaders and the executors of these functions. So within an org chart, that is actually a very hot topic in this line of work. I'm like, who does this role answer to? But in terms of what its scope is, I think it should be, if you're fully staffed and you are organized the way I think that you should be, the scope should be all of the tools, tech stack, processes, data, and information that are produced by and consumed by the go-to-market, which to me extends through success.
Makes sense. So what's the kind of things that you often see as a RevOps expert that people aren't doing so well and you have to go in and optimize?
The number one thing people do is don't consider it up front and then buy a CRM and then screw up the CRM and then need RevOps to come fix it. It's a very hot market these days, to be honest with you.
What sort of screw ups do they have with a CRM? Like, what kind of mistakes do they make?
If you're talking about a high growth tech company, the most common story is we knew we needed a CRM. So the head of sales picked the one that they preferred. They didn't know how to implement it or work it. So they took their worst BDR and the one that always kept their records clean and made that person the CRM admin. And then that person was thrown in the deep end and was trying to create a system that scaled. And those people end up actually being great RevOps people, mostly because they're given way more room than they should to try and figure out how to do something. But the downstream effects of that are many. Like you're not collecting the information right. The sales process is murky because people are applying their own definitions to it. The automation is like non-existent or poorly designed and causes more problems than it solves. You either have no data or your data has to go through all kinds of hoops and do backflips in order to be coherent. Like all kinds of problems come from just not considering it. And then oftentimes the first job of RevOps at a company is fix a whole set of problems, which is too bad. But that's really the state of the union on RevOps.
So you said that one of the big mistakes is not considering RevOps early on in the process. How should I set up RevOps?
Yeah, I think that one of the most pivotal moments is the transition from founder-led sales to having a sales function. So it's become very common, and I think for all kinds of good reasons in the tech industry, for the founder to lead sales at first, or one of the co-founders, usually the less technical one, all by themselves. And then once they believe that they have some degree of product market fit, or they are able to generate velocity, then they go and hire somebody. And usually this comes in two forms. They'll go and hire somebody who's too senior, or they'll go hire somebody who's too junior. Notice there's no right answer here. There are only
Yeah.
wrong answers because this is a very rocky transition. However, the most wrong answer is to go hire somebody too senior. The worst thing you can do is a seed or series A startup with some fresh funding and some good signals is to hire a CRO with 20 years of experience from a series C or an enterprise company, right? Those people haven't for a long time typically gotten their hands dirty, especially on things like systems, but even usually on things like talking to customers. So I always recommend that the person you want to hire when you're transitioning is an account executive level person who's just about ready to become a manager, who's super hungry and who's nailing it at their job and they're looking for more. You bring in that person, they can do it all and they're ready and poised for growth. Again, in either of those scenarios, you still haven't solved for RevOps. So I think in the second scenario, and it often sounds like a shameless plug when I'm asked this question, but I think that the consulting and fractional people are really good options temporarily at this time to come in and work with somebody to take the process that your founder has developed and turn it into something that can be tracked, measured, can be efficient and scalable. And then I think once you get a few more people, like once you get to the point where it's established, like the process has established itself enough that you need to hire against it, your RevOps person should probably come in, your full-time person, as part of that cohort. And then maybe you transition away from the fractional or the consultant. By the way, I run a consulting firm and I'm very adamant that the work we do is designed to make us obsolete. Like I don't think folks should get involved with consultants who are trying to find a way to be there forever. That's to me counterintuitive, especially in RevOps where you're trying to create efficiency. So that I usually pitch that to folks, and I often win those contracts because I'm up against somebody who's trying to convince a company that doesn't need it to sign a 12 or 24-month contract for some reason.
I'm a consultant as well. It's the same thing. It doesn't make sense to me to have these 2-3 year engagements because at that point it's like hire someone. Like you're at that point where the engagement's too long. Like they're too embedded in your systems to have that external. But
Exactly.
that's a very sidetrack sort of discussion though. If going back to
Yeah.
RevOps, let's keep on this topic for a little while longer. So CRM is obviously just one part of RevOps. What other parts do you normally touch as well? So you've gone from, again, that sort of sales process, marketing side of things. How do you tackle RevOps as a whole? Or like, what should I be looking
Yeah.
for as a CEO or a founder to know whether my RevOps is working or not?
I love this. I get asked questions of this nature so much that I'm developing a mini course on what I think the first thing that you need to do when you know you need RevOps is. And it's a little exercise that has three components. So if you do not have your stages defined, that's the number one thing you need to do. And once you define them, you also need to establish the entry and the exit criteria for those things. What do I mean by stages? Who's worked with CRM knows that all the records they're dealing with have some sort of stage or status associated with them. Those things are supposed to be reflective of what the actual customer is experiencing to some degree. I think in a lot of cases, they're way too configured to just how I want to sell this product, not how this product is going to be sold to a customer that's going through some motion. What I like to do is imagine the customer from the point of, I've never even heard of you, through, I've bought this 2 or 3 times, or I've been retained and I'm shouting out nice things about you into the market, posting on Reddit about how great you are. I like to divide that into stages, and those stages need to be objective. And so it's things like, I've never heard of you to I've heard of you. I've heard of you to I've engaged with you. And I've engaged with you to I've talked to you. Right. Then crack open your CRM and look at, so if you're HubSpot, you've got your contacts, your companies, and your deals. If you're Salesforce, you've got your leads, your contacts, your opportunities, and your accounts. And just plot where they fit into all these things. And these stages all just need to have definitions themselves as well. Very simple, very objective. They should be things that everybody can talk about. And then figure out what needs to be true in order for things to move to these stages, and write them out and put them in fields and start collecting them. If you are doing that, you are way ahead in RevOps, and it's bizarre because it's not that hard of an exercise, and it seems like almost nobody has done it.
Seems like one of those things where people emulate much bigger companies. So they think they need all these sub steps, all these different branches, but the truth is a lot
Well,
simpler.
it's so, yeah, and you're actually touching on how RevOps gets so convoluted. What our job really is to take something that's true and that's happening and make it work in systems and processes. And by true and by happening, the customer is going through a journey and your company is interacting with them. That should exist outside of your CRM, outside of any of your documentation. Like, that relationship and those decisions and the thought processes and the actions that those people are taking happen. And then we should understand them and reflect them in the system. But what people instead do way too often is, oh, I can build this cool automation, or, oh, I can build all of these other custom objects, or, oh, I can track every information or every data point that I can possibly think of, and buying tools and inventing processes and workflows and automations that just do things. And those things maybe in a standalone way might be cool or might look interesting, but that's not the job. The job is to reflect what is happening as simple as possible and make it as easy to use as possible for people, and then get the information to make really good decisions.
What would be the effect of, so you talk about this customer journey that happens in real life, and then what sort of the CRM reflects? What happens when those two are out of sync, especially in a dramatic way? What is the customer experience in that case?
Yeah, and this is one of the most common problems I see as well, which is you get some kind of leader believing in their process for selling something. This is by far the most common example of this. And in their mind, stage one means this, stage two means this, you have to do this, you have to talk to me, I have to qualify you, whatever. And you actually just start upsetting your customer because you're forcing them to go through steps that they don't need to go through in order to decide whether or not they're going to buy you. Practically speaking, this happens all the time with poorly designed go-to-market functions at, say, a very well-known HR tech company that pissed me off once, who I just wanted to
Name them.
buy.
Name them.
I'm not going to name them, but I wanted to buy it. And I knew I wanted to buy it because I had used it before at a different company. And I can't get a hold of anyone until I fill out a form. I understand there's some friction. And when you're buying, there needs to be a relationship. So you got to give, you got to take. And then I have to wait a few days for an answer. And then finally someone answers me and they say I have to talk to BDR. And I don't need to talk to a BDR because I understand everything about this product because I've bought it before and used it. And then I have to wait 2 weeks to talk to that BDR. And then when I finally get to that call, they just ask me 3 questions and then start scheduling me for another call 2 weeks later. And I'm pissed now, right? Like, this isn't helpful to me at all. All you're doing is delaying an initiative of mine that I want to have done by now. But some executive somewhere in your organization believes, no, they need to go through this step, and then they need to talk to this person, and then we need to collect these data points, then we need to go through that step. We are out of sync, and I'm pissed.
You've actually you've hit a pet peeve of mine too. I've seen it so often, especially in B2B. It's just that the only thing you can do when you're on the website is book a demo. That's all you can do. You don't see pricing, you don't see anything. And especially as someone who runs very small, like it's usually just me, right? I just want to get in there. I don't want to schedule something for a week and then have a salesperson talk me through the whole thing. I just want to get in there. So I can totally see that. Like, you lose that initiative and again, friction can be a very useful tool, but you're right. I get annoyed.
For sure. Like, there needs to be at least some level of flexibility in how this happens. You have to accommodate me and show me you understand me as the buyer to some degree. And this is in no way a slight on these salespeople. I think poor BDRs get beat up so bad. I think in a lot of cases, it's because someone more senior than them has screwed something up and made customers have to go through something they don't want to, and then they lash out at the person they're talking to. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So you got to meet me where I am.
Yeah. I'd almost again, I come from the tech side of things. So for me, if you need someone to go through a demo that says there's something wrong with your product and your onboarding, there should be simpler ways of at least getting slightly acquainted with it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially for big enterprise level stuff, which you want that red carpet treatment. But it's a smell from the small side. If you're a small company, it's dealing with small businesses, especially, it's a red flag.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. What you're saying is reminding me of a conversation I had earlier this week with a very senior sales leader about the track for RevOps. And he was saying about how he thinks that there's going to be more RevOps people in executive level roles, which I agree with and hope for. But we got into a conversation about the track to a CRO. And my prediction is that they're going to see a lot more RevOps people ending up in the CRO seat for tech companies. And to your point, I think that the RevOps people are really well poised to be the CRO of companies that are product-led growth, that are transactional, that have fast sales cycle, that deal with small business, that deal with a lot of customers in a short period of time, because there's so much operational complexity, but there's not a lot of human complexity in that, especially if you have a really good product, because the product absorbs a lot of the human complexity.
Yeah.
Where our person who was an account executive at Yahoo in 1989 is going to, and who are most of the VPs of sales now, they are still poised and still absolutely the best people out there to be selling Oracle or Salesforce to enterprise, or things that the most primary thing you need to do is deal with in seemingly unending network of stakeholders and opinionated executives at a giant company that can't make a decision. Like, your RevOps person is not going to help you. You need a people person, relationship person to be able to navigate that sort of thing. And your systems are probably going to be really simple. Opportunity, $55 million, going to close in 2029. Here are the 50 people I need to talk to. There's not going to be data on this thing. Go
Just the
come
wine and
back and
dine
put big
approach. Yeah.
long notes on what you've done, and that's actually the data we need.
Yeah, but it's not scalable. That's the thing. They have these huge, big ticket deals, but if you're trying to do that with even 1,000 people, that would be far too many to deal with. Or even 100, you go a lot lower. 100 would be a lot to deal with for one person. So I can definitely
Yeah.
see that. Is there anything like you'd say about RevOps that you see a lot of people do well, especially people you come into? What's their natural inclination?
When I no, there's something that happened this week. It's actually the same conversation I just referenced. A lot of the calls I get are from revenue leaders who just changed orgs, who come to a new company. And a lot of times when somebody needs to bring in a new sales leader, they probably also need to recalibrate their whole RevOps org, not necessarily just because there's a new leader and they need to accommodate that leader, but usually because you're hiring a new leader because things aren't where they need to be, or you need to get to that next level anyway. And the ones who are getting into jobs and calling on RevOps resources right away, to me, that's a green flag. And that's something I'm really happy to see. And when I get into those situations, my favorite question to ask them is, how do you work with RevOps? Right? Tell me what your relationship was at your last company with RevOps. And usually you get all kinds of flattering answers. You get people telling you stories about how the VP and the CRO and the head of RevOps were super, super tight, or you get sales leaders saying things like, I left my last company because I couldn't convince the CEO to invest in this. Like, I needed the visibility, I needed the operational support, I needed better systems, I needed better tools. They wouldn't give me that, so I left. But yeah, I think it's becoming more common to just appreciate it and to know you need it in terms of the execution of it. I don't know if we're at a point now where it's like, here are the things people do well and here are the things people struggle with. I think that these are the RevOps person is burdened with a series of things that it seems like almost everybody struggles with, exclusively tasks of that nature.
Focusing on that, the CEO not wanting to invest in RevOps, what are the sort of objections people normally have, and why, if they need it, why don't they use it?
There are a few. One, it's a cost center. So I, I think RevOps has been hurt the least by the economy not going so well since 2020 and 2021. However, still, there's lots of people will be like, I just don't want to pay for extra stuff that's not revenue generating. That's something that every function except sales and marketing deal with to some degree. And RevOps is not exempt from that because it's still hard. It can be done, but it's still hard to make a case for like directly attributing revenue to RevOps. The second one, and I think this is probably more typical of older leaders, is they just don't they believe that their head of sales should be able to do this job, like that it's part of the mandate and that they're the right person to do it and that it should be handled that way. When you get in those situations, it's a tough conversation for me because I don't want to do a job with a head of sales who appreciates me, but whose boss sees me as just a drain on their financial resources. It's a really hard position to be in.
I appreciate you're a little biased on this, but what is this sort of viewing RevOps as a cost center and trying to cut back on that to save money? Is that a false economy? Do you think that ignoring RevOps is more expensive than just paying for it and investing in it?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, yes. So there's the day-to-day friction that you're going to deal with when nobody's taking charge of systems and process. That'll be felt every day. And then there's the decision making that comes with not having clean, actionable data. That decision making can be very costly. And unfortunately, I don't get to be in the room when everybody gets frustrated that they can't find an answer to a question, because then it's really easy to pitch it. But oftentimes, not that close to some acute problem that you can point at it when you're in my position. But yeah, it's not a good idea. And there's so much data now about it's the fastest growing role on LinkedIn in North America for I think 2 years running now. It grew really fast when the economy was hot. Then it grew as a role faster, at least relative to other roles, when the economy slowed. So you can look at the macro trends. You can go talk to anybody in a revenue org, and more and more things are pointing to, and opinions pointing to, this is a really necessary thing, even if it's hard to articulate sometimes.
It does seem there's a lot more of a trend towards the data-driven model for everything, including product development. Everyone wants to make decisions off data. Like even with the past,
To a
10
fault.
years, well, to a fault, yeah, because data can lie. But
It can.
it does
And
make
it's
sense
hard
that,
to articulate non-data driven justifications for things to certain types, but
yeah,
I really believe in the power of intuition. So
sure.
sometimes have that working against you, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I still think good, clean data is good. It's a good thing on the whole. Like, you can't argue against it.
In general, so RevOps, as you said, it sits really weirdly in the org tree. So who should RevOps have a relationship with, and how much authority should they really have in how things are run?
So obviously, your heads of any go-to-market function should have a close one-to-one, weekly, daily, probably daily relationship with your head of RevOps. I think they should have a seat at the executive table. I think that there are there are a lot of arguments about people being like, they should roll into a CRO, and Montagues and Capulets this problem. Should they roll into a CRO or not? The people who say not think COO or CFO, and many think the CEO. I think the answer actually depends on the type of org you are and the mandates of those people. But I think a typical revenue leader of today can't tell the story with the level of depth that a typical executive team needs without a RevOps person there helping them. Some can, but I think by and large, you have a qualified data brain and a quantified data brain together, and they're most effective when they're working side by side. And I think that having them in a hierarchy can create problems. And by that, I just mean, if your head of RevOps answers to your CRO, but the CEO wants answers, and those answers are not flattering in terms of the picture for the CRO, what are they going to do, right? Some people are going to have to speak against the person they answer to in order to tell the truth to the org. And that's a really difficult position to be in. Again, it depends on how your org is designed, but that's one of the big problems I see about that reporting line. And it's a very common thread.
What sort of questions would this RevOps person help make decisions about? When would I call the RevOps guy into the room when I'm trying to think about something?
Headcount is one of the big ones, headcount and planning and hiring. I think you call the RevOps person into the room when you're trying to figure out what's going wrong. You call the RevOps person into the room when you want to figure out if your marketing or partnerships efforts are yielding results. You want to figure out where in the funnel something is broken, whether it's top of funnel and maybe your BDRs aren't performing well, or there's a problem in that org, or maybe it's farther down and you get really good qualified opportunities and your account executives are struggling, or maybe you get people all the way through to sales and they become customers, and then you have churn problems. Like, diagnosing any of these sorts of go-to-market problems, I think you want the RevOps person in the room to speak to it, paint that picture, bring the data, and hopefully, if you have a good one, offer some solutions.
Feels like we're about to wrap up. Is there anything you want me to ask you at this point, or anything you want to talk about?
I want to talk. I think I gestured at this earlier on, interested in the journey of Ven and my company as a boutique RevOps consulting business. Just follow me on LinkedIn and interact with me, because we're probably going to sharpen the message and the positioning. We might tighten up on a segment, and we might get a little bit more productized in how we're approaching the market. That's something that I'm working on. I'm not going to say too much about just yet, but some changes are coming for us. So that's something that I'll just shamelessly plug a little bit. But other than that, I'm just anyone who wants to talk about anything, particularly the RevOps landscape, approach me. I'm always open to it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. This is James McKay, the CEO and founder of Ven.studio is the website for that one. And of course, as he said, you can reach out on LinkedIn or just contact him through his website. Perfect. Thanks for being here, James. And for
Thank
everyone
you.
else, we'll see you next week.